Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. JustusRStone here with another one of my Pandora Hearts videos. This one on volume number 11. If you're brand new to this series, two rules. First rule, spoilers. Nothing but spoilers in this video. So if you have not read Pandora Hearts volumes 1 through 11, you're going to get spoiled if you keep watching this video. So go read that stuff and then come on back. Second rule, I record these videos before I read any future volumes. So anything that I say I think is going to happen or I wonder at, I'm legit to have no idea what's going to happen next. So let's get right into it because volume 11 got a little gruesome. Yeah, so let's start right from the beginning. So first of all, we find out that Break is blind. We'll start there. Break is blind. This I found kind of surprising because seeing how Break has been very integral to this whole story so far, I found that taking away his vision, especially like even though he says, oh, well, you know, give me a couple of days, I'll be able to sense things out and blah, blah, blah. I'm kind of interested to see just how much this is really going to hamper him. The one thing I really loved about that, though, was that when he was saying that losing his vision wasn't that big a deal, there was just that one flash of Sharon with her smile, and you could see that that was the one thing that he was going to miss. That there was that, just that total emotion, devotion, that he was like, this is the one thing that I do feel regret. And I thought it was, just like I said, it's only one little picture, but I thought, what a great little character thing for Break, and says so much about him and about his relationship with Sharon, and I thought that was great. It was a great little thing to include. But this really, I mean, this is just all fallout at this point, right? So this is where everybody's sort of talking about what happened to them at Sablier, and Gil, for whatever reason, decides not to tell anybody. He's sort of like, oh, I didn't see anything, even though everybody knows that he is lying. And I get the sense that it's because of this conflict with him, right? This conflicted feeling of now he knows that his first devotion was to Jack, and now he's with Oz. And I kind of wonder if part of that in him is this conflict of, am I so devoted to Oz only because of Jack and because there's part of Jack within him? Or, you know, is it something else other than that? Am I actually devoted to Oz himself? And so then we get into the point where we leave Break and Sharon is telling Oz and Gil and Alice like why it is that Sablier was supposedly locked off. She basically says that, well, you know, Pandora uses it for human experimentation because Pandora is a good organization. What? So basically, they take these destitute people and say, hey, how about you go down into the hole and mine some stuff for us or do some work down there for us. And then they just sit back and watch to see what the energies of the abyss do to these poor bastards. And there's no shortage of people because, heck, there's lots of poor, destitute, desperate individuals. Wow. And then Oz sort of wonders, he's like, so then what's with that orphanage, right? And we get that scene of, can't remember his name, the kid, the son of the Grimm or whoever it was we hunted down in like the second episode, whatever. Anyway, he's like sitting there talking to his dad because he's kind of in the head and on a phone that's not even connected to anything. And he's like, yeah, Oz was here and it was great. And he's got beautiful blonde hair, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, everything's fine. I know you can't come because you're working. Wow. I don't know what's the deal. So I don't know whether this is going to turn out to be sort of a benevolent thing where we're made to feel like the orphanage is potentially sinister, or if it's actually an issue. I mean, Leo, we know as the valet of Elliot, we know that he considers these kids his brothers and sisters, so it's pretty clear that he came from the orphanage, which means he would have probably been living there for quite a few years. So he seems to be okay, right? I mean, so far, who knows? I guess we'll find out down the road. Anyway, so Oz has this let's get into the meat of where this really goes. Okay, so Oz says, all right, well, it's pretty clear right now what we've got to do. We got to go see Duke Barma, and we have got to get some more information. And Duke Barma is, well, he plays coy for a while there, but then he's pretty forthcoming. He says, okay, well, he tells them about this whole spell that they used to seal the soul of Glenn Baskerville. Now, one thing that I want to point out here, they used the body parts of Jack, and we get from this that in this volume, it's basically said that I guess Jack suffered a mortal wound from Glenn. At least I'm assuming it's from Glenn, because he didn't seem to have a mortal wound before he faced Glenn. But anyway, so he had a mortal wound that was going to result in his death regardless. So I guess him knowing that he was going to die regardless is why he agreed to allow his body to be used. Now, they say there's 5 seals, and we know that there's 2 arms, 2 legs, and then your torso, but what about your head? I'm going to get into this. I'm just leading in to sort of what I'm going to talk about as we get into the more gruesome part of this volume. So anyway, they go to see Duke Barma. Duke Barma's like, okay, so here's what's going on. And basically, when the Barmas created these seals, they sent them off with some of their sort of most trusted magicians and lost track of them, which I kind of find hard to believe, but I don't know if, I'm trying to think if maybe that was done on purpose so that even if, say, like one of the Barmas was caught and tortured, they wouldn't be able to reveal the location of the seals, which I guess kind of makes sense. But at the same time, you would think there must have been some kind of safeguard to sort of say, well, we may need to find them at some point. But yeah, so anyway, so Duke Barma says, well, the big thing here is that we have found one. I've found one. And I want you guys, the exchange for this information, because, Barma doesn't give any information for free. His exchange is, I want you guys to go and find that seal. I want you to go visit this ancestor, the descendant of the magician, and I want you to find out what happened to the seal, where it is, and so forth. So Oz and company go out to travel, but there's so much stuff. Okay, so first of all, Sharon freaks out on Barma about why he's withholding this information and why is he using everybody as pawns and everything else. And he calls his chain, which I'm going to think is Dodo, because it really didn't look like an owl to me. And then Gil steps in and basically uses Raven to negate this thing, like just gone like that. And Barma's sort of like, oh, so you finally accepted it, right? And even Gil sort of has a conversation with Oz later about how he's sort of holding back about how much he can and cannot do because of what it may do to the seal that he's placed on the B-Rabbit's power within Oz to try and limit the movement of the NQs. We find out that the NQs on Oz did in fact move on its own when he summoned that scythe. So much stuff going on, but let's get to the mansion. Okay, so this is a spoiler video, so I'm hoping you guys have read it. I'm sure you have. So we know what goes on in the mansion. So basically, the ancestor, the descendant of, I keep saying ancestor, the descendant of the original magician is quite old, quite infirmed, and has this girl working for him. And the girl basically kills anybody who comes into the place. And they've got sort of a room that limits chains. It doesn't allow people to summon their chain, which gets completely negated because Oz does in fact summon the scythe. And do you notice again, it's this whole thing where, I'm going to destroy you. It's this Oz. We saw this same sort of thing when he was in Sablier in the last volume, where Oz, this almost switch goes off. And I've mentioned this in numerous volumes before, how they change how Mochizuki changes how she draws his eyes and stuff like that. So you can sort of not just get the gist that he's switched gears by the dialogue, but even by the expression on his face, the look in his eyes. And at this point, he's all like, you kind of piss me off. I've got this ringing in my ears. Maybe if I kill you, the ringing will stop. And so his scythe, his scythe. I'm going to say it's his scythe. Even though it's supposedly Alice's scythe, I'm really starting to question whether that's a legitimate thing or not. In any case, he summons the scythe. He's about to chop this chick's head off when Alice grabs him and stops him. And so at this point, so Oz is like, you know what, you're right, I shouldn't do it. And so he stops and kind of comes back to his senses. And at that point, the magician's, descendant shows up and he's like, okay, that's enough. We're sorry, we did all this, but we were told that anybody who approached here had to be destroyed except for the person who held the bee rabbit. And so then they find out that the seal is actually in the basement, like beneath this mansion, and that's actually the seal's power that causes chains to be negated. Now, this is where sometimes I'm kind of wondering if that's why Oz was still able to summon the scythe, is because if they're using Jack's body as the seal, like as the medium for the seal, then Jack was the one who possessed Bee Rabbit, right? Like, at least I'm pretty sure that's been confirmed. I mean, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments down below, but I am fairly certain that Jack was, in fact, his chain was the Bee Rabbit. And let's remember, too, that when Jack would have faced Glenn Baskerville, it would have been when Glenn held all 5 of the family chains within him. So the chain, the Griffin, who is the chain of the Vesalius family, would not have been in possession of the Vesalius family. So the Vesalius family would have had different chains. Or maybe people weren't aligned with chains at that point other than the Baskervilles, and maybe this is something that makes Jack unique. We still don't, I still don't know that. I mean, we know that the Abyss existed. We know that people were aware of the Abyss. We know that the Baskervilles had, at least to a certain extent, they were the stewards, it seems, of the Abyss. And that most of these chain of events have been put into motion because of the Abyss developing a sense of self and identity and ego and intention, and basically throwing everything into chaos. And I think it's that what allowed illegal contractors to become a reality. So if Jack had a chain, which was the Bee Rabbit, then somehow he did that before chains became sort of like a common thing amongst even the nobility. And maybe that's why the Bee Rabbit is so strong. I don't know. I mean, like the history thing, we get bits and pieces of history, but I don't really remember them talking a whole lot about chains before the whole tragedy of Sablier. After the tragedy of Sablier seems to be when we have the each house, the 4 remaining dukedoms, each having a chain assigned to them, which is a black-winged chain that we already know one of their major powers is being able to traverse into the Abyss. We know that Pandora was created after the tragedy of Sablier, and that it's Pandora's agents that seem to be able to make legal contracts with chains. And we also know that that sort of seems to be when illegal contractors become more of an epidemic. So it seems to me, based on my cursory evaluation, that Jack shouldn't have had a chain, and yet it seems pretty clear that he did, because he told this magician at the time, before he was sacrificed, he told the magician that the only person they should allow in is the person who possesses the Bee Rabbit. Which to me says that Jack knew that somehow the Bee Rabbit would be transferred to someone else. Now, this is where things are, like, this is where timelines start getting kind of screwy to me with this, right? Because, so Alice claims to be the Bee Rabbit. She claims to be that chain and that the power belongs to her. And yet, we've seen now Oz on several occasions summon that power without her, and that even then, if Jack had the Bee Rabbit within him as a chain beforehand, Alice was still alive at the time that Jack was still alive. So how did Alice become tied to the presence of the Bee Rabbit? And why is everything about her contract with Oz seeming to be topsy-turvy compared to every other contractor. I guess we'll find out. That was one thing that, okay, and since we're talking about like contracts and incuses and stuff like that, did you notice, I mean, I'm sure you guys noticed, I noticed, how Oz very specifically states that his incuse doesn't disappear, and that it's like, unlike everybody else, like all the other contractors, illegal contractors, their incuse only appears when they are actively using their powers. And Oz says, did you notice only breaks, which has gone all the way around, and mine, are present on invisible on our bodies at all times. So this kind of, I was like, does that mean that Oz has been around already? He's already done the whole circuit? Or that, or did Alice, okay, so I'm gonna talk this out because even I'm just sort of cluing into this. And this video is going to be really long. I'm really sorry, but I'll try to make this really brief. What I'm thinking here. So, Alice, what if Alice had a chain? What if Alice was like, we saw her dead in Sablier, but what if her soul? I mean, I don't know if you're physically pulled into the abyss or whether it's your soul or whether it's both, or what if somehow she had a chain and she was dragged into the abyss, became a chain, but because of something different with her, I'm just talking out my butt. I don't know. We're going to find out, I'm sure, as we go along. But we got to talk about the headhunter. Like, we have to talk about the headhunter and how that ties into sort of the end part of this book, which is the backstory about Gil getting Raven, and also about what the headhunter was, what it did to the Night Ray family. So the headhunter, of course, shows up after Oz and company have left the mansion, chops a whole bunch of heads off, is crazy as F apparently, keeps doing the Queen of Hearts, she baked some tarts, is doing that rhyme in her head. And I say her only because she's eventually referred to as the Queen of Hurts. So she appears, beheads the people there, and then breaks the seal. At least that's what it seems, because that same sort of earthquake happened when the first seal was broken. In the sort of backstory about the whole headhunter thing, when Elliot is sort of remembering what happened, we find out that basically Elliot's older brothers were all killed by the headhunter, and that was sort of the point where Gil split from the Night Ray family, and that Elliot's angry because he thinks that Gil ran away, whereas in Gil's idea, he thought he was the one who was attracting the headhunter, and so he was trying to put distance between himself and the rest of the Night Rays so that they wouldn't get hurt. This totally doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so first off, Vincent is having this discussion with Ada. This is partly how we have the thing. And tell me Vincent isn't, like, after I just gained some sympathy for this kid, after we saw, like, how he was mistreated and everything else, then he goes and acts like a complete psycho with Ada about how he wants to destroy her and defile her and all this kind of stuff. And, I mean, part of me almost wonders if this is the whole love-hate thing, right? That in part of his mind, he's trying to convince himself that he hates her and he wants to destroy her and everything else. And that part of him almost wants to do it just to see what Gil will do, just to try and get a rise out of Gil. But I kind of wonder if it's sort of that borderline where he really will end up having feelings for her. Love and hate, they always say, are so closely tied. And you live long enough, you find that's pretty close to the truth. And so it really doesn't seem that beyond possibility to me that Vincent will develop some true feelings for her. But to me, it doesn't say a lot about her character, that she seems completely ignorant of it. So either it says that Vincent's an amazing, amazing actor, or maybe she's just a little dense. And let's face it, kids, love makes you dense. So that may be part of it too. In any case, so Vincent says that it all started when Gil was poisoned. But we go from poisoning to all of a sudden people getting their heads chopped off. This seems like it escalated pretty quickly. Like, it almost seems to me like either one of two things happened. Either A, someone tried to kill Gil and failed, and so they resorted to a second option, which was the headhunter. Or B, the poisoning of Gil had nothing to do with the headhunter. Or C, Gil was poisoned to make it look like it was tied to the headhunter, but that the headhunter's purpose was something completely different. I'm not too sure which of these theories is correct at this point, but it seems really weird to me that you can have a psycho who's completely possessed by the idea of wanting to chop people's heads off, and the very first thing that it does is try to poison a dude. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And why did it stop? Even when Gil left the Night Rays, why did it stop coming after Gil? Now, I've been thinking about this over the past couple of days. I've read this thing now twice or so, but the only thing I can think of is that for whatever reason, somebody was trying to separate Gil from the Night Rays, and they didn't want Gil dead. And you notice all of this happened after Gil got Raven. So it's almost like once someone knew that Gil had Raven, that it was beyond the reach of the Night Ray family, then they sought to separate Gil from the Night Rays, so that the Night Rays themselves would have no control or power over a chain. Almost as if somebody was looking to weaken the Night Rays. I don't know if this is accurate, and I don't know if this is true. Only time will tell. But it seems kind of odd, right? And then all of a sudden it's like the Elder Night Ray brothers are killed. Gil, for whatever reason, is left alone, and then all of a sudden nothing happens. Now we have one seal that's been destroyed, and suddenly the headhunter is back. And what's the very first thing that the headhunter does? Is goes after the second seal that we know where it is. Now, when I mentioned earlier in the video that I thought it was kind of important to mention the whole distinction between the torso and the head, here's the thing. If we think about it, the body generally is considered to have 6 parts. Your 2 arms, your 2 legs, your torso, and your head. But there was 5 seals. So where's Jack's head? Is Jack's head still attached to his torso? Is Jack's head somewhere else? And is the headhunter somehow tied into that? I mean, it seems to me like a scythe would be a really good thing to cut people's heads off with. But we know that it's not Oz, because Oz was in the abyss when the Night Ray brothers were killed. And Oz was outside with Alice, Gilbert, and Sharon when the headhunter attacked the mansion. So we know it's not Oz, at least not physically Oz. So I don't know where I'm going with this. It's almost like there was something done to prevent Raven, like to separate Raven from the Night Rays, and then in addition to that, now someone is trying to find the body parts of Jack Vesalius, and I kind of wonder if this whole obsession with heads has to do with Jack's head somehow. And I mean, we do have a lot of sort of basis in this story for split personalities, dual personalities. We know that Glenn's soul can go into another body. So there's a lot of this idea of this disembodiment of self, right? So that your self can exist somewhere else. Even if you are thrown into the abyss, you disappear from this world, but you still exist in the abyss. And then you can be sort of converted in the abyss into a chain, which then sort of starts a whole cycle over again of you trying to make a contract, dragging somebody else into the abyss who's then made a chain, and so on and so forth. So we have lots of sort of cause for this to say that perhaps the headhunter is either another personality of someone we know, or is a fragment of a person that we know, or potentially is just something completely different. And I'm not too sure why. The timing of it just seems kind of weird to me. And that's why I'm kind of wondering if it had something specifically to do with Raven. Because as soon as Raven was in possession of a person, that's when the first attack was. And then it's like, now that Jack, the first seal was broken, all of a sudden the headhunter is back again. It just seems that there's some sort of timing working here. Now, I'll close this video with just one other thought, because, again, these videos get longer and longer, it seems. There's one other thing that I sort of sort of was taking a quick look through just to make sure I hadn't missed anything major, and I did, is when Gil is taken by Raven. Did you notice that it said it was the third time? I'm thinking the first time was Glenn, but what was the second time? I have no idea. I'm not even going to guess because I have zero idea. Yeah, I really don't know. And even the first time, yeah, because it says we were interrupted the first time, and then it said the second time you had forgotten yourself. And then there was the third time, which is the time that he actually made the contract. So I don't recall a second time. Unless that was how he and Vincent escaped. Maybe that's how he and Vincent somehow escaped the abyss, was through Raven. Maybe. We'll see. Anyway, this has become another super long video for Pandora Hearts. I love this series, and I know from a lot of you that comment in the comments that you feel the same. I am going to get this done so that I can sit down and read volume 12, because I got to know what happens next. And I will be here again probably next week with another video on volume number 12, so I can just keep moving along and reading this book because I'm loving every minute of it. Thanks very much for watching the video. And if you're new here, click on subscribe so you can keep up with the rest of my Pandora Hearts videos. I'm going to be doing this all the way to the final volume number 24. Thanks for joining me and hanging in there in this long video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.